This is Gestoras.
Gestoras explores the life and work of Latina cultural managers, sharing their stories of success, challenges, and lessons learned. Episodes alternate between English and Spanish. Today's episode is in English. Afro-Latina soprano Zuly Inirio is from the Dominican Republic and has appeared as a soloist throughout the United States and Europe. She actively pursues bringing awareness to Afro-Latinidad in classical music with her Afro-Latinx song and opera project, whose goal is to commission new works about Afro-Latin and Afro-Latinx communities, as well as decolonize the classical music canon by uplifting the contributions and stories of Afro-Latin American and Afro-Latinx classical composers. She holds a doctorate of musical arts from Louisiana State University and a master's in social work at the University of Pittsburgh. She is co-director of the Center for Ethnic Studies Research, CESR, at the University of Pittsburgh.
Hello, Zuly. It's great to have you here. Thank you for making the time to be with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
We're super excited about you and your work and super excited about learning more about it and sharing it with our audience. So you're a musician. So the first question I have for you is about music. What led you to music? What led you to opera? And what did music teach you?
So music has been a huge part of my life from the very beginning since I was growing up. My family tells me that when I was very young, 1-2 years old, I used to cry a lot. And the only thing that would calm me down is like if one of my brothers would put records of like Dominican music full blast. And that was the only thing that I would just really help me to feel better. And so that's something that he would do after school every day. Just come grab Zuly, put some music on, dance with her. So I think music, even before I could even express what it meant to me, it was speaking to me as a child in general, music in general. And I grew up in a very musical household, meaning that there was music around, but my family are not musicians. I'm the only one, actually. And so what led me, I grew up with a lot of music all around, lots of parties, lots of dancing, very much Dominican culture. I go to school, I sing in the choir. Around 10 years old, my music teacher tells my parents you should put her voice lessons. She actually has a really nice voice. And I was just like, not serious, but not too serious, but not too serious about it. I was 5, I was young. I was like in 5th grade. And when I was in high school, I was also in choir and I was singing. And my sister, she and I went to go see an opera because I'd never been to see an opera. And I really liked the movie Pretty Woman. And she went to an opera. And I was like, oh, how glamorous. So I want to go to an opera. And I went to see the same opera, La Traviata, or I should have said anglicized La Traviata. And so I go to this opera. I'm in Miami, Florida Grand Opera. This is before they had the Arch Center, another theater. And I just remember being so, I was just so enamored immediately with the spectacle that is opera. It was costumes. It was the music, the orchestra. It was all the people on stage acting, and then the singing that was unamplified, and I could hear it all the way in the back. It was just so impactful. And the cool thing about Miami is that when you go see the opera, they have both English and Spanish subtitles. So that's pretty cool. And so it's accessible in that way. And it just really hit me in that moment, experiencing that live. I was like, I don't know what this is, but I want to do that. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to try to do that. Right. And it's just like, oh, whatever, And so that's what got me into opera. And I should also mention, when I was living in the Dominican Republic as a child, I did dance ballet. So I knew of classical music. I was in the Nutcracker a bunch of times as a kid. I was one of the Raccoon's minions. Great. And so I did know of classical music, but I'd never seen opera. And thinking about And I'm just thinking now culturally, like it makes total sense that I would like opera, right? I grew up watching
Yeah, be
telenovelas.
dramatic, over the top, and cocktail.
Right. It's it's just so much, but also getting to the core of like human emotions and moving you. So it had all the things that make me happy. And so that's how I got into it.
You're living the life I wish I had, I think, because I saw the first opera I ever saw was The Magic Flute. And my father took us when we were, maybe I was 10. And the Queen of the Night was a singer who was in a wheelchair. So they would like lift her up and down depending on, like, it was just an incredible performance. And I remember thinking, I want to be an opera singer. So we auditioned, my younger brother and I, and we were urchins in Ipagliacci, street urchins. The difference between you and I is you have talent and a voice, and I did not. I had enthusiasm, but no voice. So the best roles I could get after that. I mean, you were a minion in ballet of the Rat King. I was Bush number 3, third shrub.
Listen, it takes a village to make an opera happen.
Takes a village. It takes a village, and where are you without the foliage, right?
I will say that as much as I love the opera, I did not see a single person that looked like me on that stage. So I didn't even know if I could do it. Is that something I could? I mean, I want to do it, but is it something I can actually do?
So how did you know? How did that happen that you knew or you decided to do it?
Well, I graduated from high school. I was 17 when I graduated from high school, and I'm a very nerdy person. So I was like, I want to start college right away. And so I started college the summer after I graduated high school. And I took like 9 credits in the summer, which is insane now that I think about it. It was my first college semester. But I actually was going in the music education track because I thought, I can't sing opera. So let me just do music education because I like music, right? And my voice teacher at the time, she was the one that was like, you have a really nice voice. I think you should try to do performance. And I was like, you think I could do this? She's like, yeah. Actually, why don't you go to the music library and check out what recordings they have and see what comes up for you? Like, see what you like and bring it back. And so I went to the music library, and this is, DVD. This is not even DVDs. This is VHSs, right? And CDs. People might know how old I am now. VHS. There was some DVDs, but mostly VHSs. Well, the good stuff was on VHS. So I then saw, as I'm looking through the library, the list of in the library, I find Leontine Price, Martina Arroyo, Shirley Verrett, Grace Bunbury, Jesse Norman, right? Marian Anderson, all these beautiful Black women singing. People that look like me singing. And also not just singing, like being at the pinnacle of this art form. I was like, wow. Especially Martina Arroyo. She's of African-American descent and Puerto Rican descent. And I'm Dominican. But I was like, she's like, at the time I did not have the term Afro-Latina, but she's Black, she's Latina. And she's singing this stuff. Okay, so this is something I do. So I went ahead and I checked out the CD of Leontine Price. I think the CD was called Leontine Price Rediscovered. It's like one of her early recitals. I checked that out, and I took it to my voice lesson, and I said, I want to sound like that. And my teacher was like, that's a very good choice. She's like, let's start working, right? So that's how that's how I had the inkling that this was something that was a possibility for me because of people that did it before.
That's a wonderful story. That's really, really wonderful.
I remember when we had an interview with Leah, she mentioned that her teachers actually told her that she cannot she cannot play on the piano because she's older already, and that's why she chose the bassoon instead. And I'm so excited that your teachers just inspired you and motivated you to go on singing.
Yeah, she did the opposite. Like, she was just like, why don't you try because I was underselling myself because of, the structures of society, right? She, bless her soul, was like, no, be your full self, and let's do this thing. Let's do it. And so, yeah, just I think that the artists, especially artists of the global majority that are now doing things, don't realize the kind of legacy and impact they're going to have for the people that are coming up.
That's an amazing story. I have kind of a follow-up question. So, as you have been opera singer for many years, and I wonder what's your experience of how classical operas depict women, like Black women, Latinas, as operas are known to be like very conservative institutions. And I wonder how it shaped you as an arts leader.
Nisha's not playing games with me today. Well, okay, so let me think. Not ready. No, but I am ready. Here we go. So let's first talk about how operas tend to depict women. So I think, how am I going to say this? Okay. The way that I do the work that I do in terms of like kind of going to some of the Afro-Latinx song and opera project and some of the scholarly work that I do, I kind of utilize music as the vehicle to show me what's going on socially, right? And what's going on within a society. Because more often than not, the art that's happening is telling us a lot about the zeitgeist of the specific moment, right? And so when I take a look at some of the portrayals and the stories of women from like the 17th, 18th, 19th century, it's rooted in patriarchy, right? More often than not, there are some of our heroines who have like this fire in them and they're kind of rebelling, but then what happens to them? I think about Carmen, right? The character of Carmen, right? They end up dead. But more often than not, we end up dead anyway because drama, right? And so thinking about newer operas, right? We're dealing with people that are either living or that were living more recently. There's a bigger responsibility, I think, in those moments, especially when it's like people that were real people, to portray them as three-dimensional people and not continue to perpetuate some of these stereotypes that we find in kind of the older operas. But that's not to say that we can't kind of take a look at that critically and grow from it, right? So there's really cool things that people are doing with, for example, the opera Madama Butterfly, right? Giving alternate endings, having discussions about why it was portrayed that way. So how did it shape me? Being a woman of color, being a Black woman, being a Latinx woman, being a Black Latinx woman in opera is very, when I first started, I think was very difficult because I think it was hard for people to grasp my identity. And just like in other kind of theater art forms, it's kind of cast kind of on stereotypes, right? Like what you look like. So I would never be asked to do anything that had to do with Latinidad. Because to people, I didn't look like Latina, but my friend that had dark hair and she was, white American woman, she would be asked to play a Latina, but not me. Right? Or when I would be asked, I was always asked to sing things from Porgy and Bess, which I do. It's an important show. And then I would ask to do other things that had to do with African American culture. People were very surprised that I did not know Lift Every Voice and Sing until 2 years ago. And I was like, they're like, why don't you know that? I'm like, I never heard, like, I grew up in a Dominican household. Like, if you want me to sing some Fernandito Villalona, I asked. Like, so and it would be taken as like a slight or something. And I'm like, no, you got to understand that how I'm perceived versus like what my culture is might not make sense to you. Understand that Blackness is diasporic, right? That Blackness doesn't look one way within the U.S. is one way within the U.S. So, so there was some of that. It was very difficult, I think, at first the way that I approached opera at first was to do all the things they were asking me to do because that would equal that I would be successful. But what ended up happening is they were asking, this business was asking a lot of me, like asking me to conform to a point where I was losing myself. Right? Like, oh, don't come with your curly hair to an audition, anglicize your name, all these things. And I started to realize that I was losing the joy of like why I started to do it to begin with.
Mm. Was this also the reason you later focused on DEI issues and being like, that's how the arts leader shouldn't be?
Yeah, it was through my experiences in opera as, I was conforming to the point. It's like there was something, with nobody ever explicitly said anything about my skin color, but it was my body size. Like, oh, I was too fat or my hair was too curly or all these things. And it didn't matter what I did, but the bar always moved so that I could get a foot in the door. Right. And it's like, and then you're probably thinking like, oh, well, they even mentioning her singing? Yeah, they liked it. They just didn't, but it didn't fit the package of what opera is, right? Or the other thing is with people of the global majority in opera, it's like there can only be like a handful, right? Like the token. When there's so many of us that do this art form and do this really well. So yeah, I started focusing on, I would call it like just equity and social justice issues within the classical music space, because I realized I realized that it wasn't, first of all, it was actually personal, right? I was just like, I need to be myself. How can I be myself in this space? So one of the first things I ever did was I did an all Spanish recital when I was doing my doctorate at LSU. All Spanish repertoire from Spain and Latin America. I was the first person to ever do that. And that was in 2000 something. I'm not going to say it because then people know how old I am. And so then I had a hard time finding repertoire that had to do with Afro-Latin people, like with Black Latin people. And I'm like, you're in the music, I can't find anything. I did find the one piece, Cinco Canciones Negras, which is by Javier Monsalvaj. He's a Catalan composer from Spain. It was all Afro-Cuban poetry, including Nicolas Guillen, which I love, right? And so that was the only piece I could find. I was like, there's just, and that stayed with me. I was like, this is weird, whatever. That stayed with me. And I had a lot of tough experiences abroad, singing abroad in Germany and Western Europe when I was living there. And that kind of like really radicalized me to do the work that you're saying exactly, Anush, which is like the DEI work. So I'm like, why is this so difficult for me? Not for some of my other colleagues, and to better understand the systems I live in, how they're kind of the systems that we live in broader society, in my opinion, we find that as a microcosm within the classical music space. It's a mirror of one another. Art usually does that. And so it's like, how am I finding this here? And why am I finding this here? And what can I do to make it better for myself, but also for the people that are going to come after me? Because this work is not just about me. It started that way, but it goes so much farther and beyond me.
And you started this Afro-Latinx Song and Opera project, and I'm really interested in learning more about the genesis then of that project and what. So tell us what it's about and what you're trying to do there and how it came about.
Yeah. So that started after I came back from living abroad, and I was living in Munich. I'm currently based out of Pittsburgh, and that was all, like, I got here October 2019. Everything shut down March 2020, right? So it's shortly after I got here. I had a ton of auditions. I had gotten into the Gerda Listener competition, the Jensen competition. I was like, I had momentum, ready to go, all gone. And then I'm sitting at home like, what am I going to do? And I got to sit with myself for the first time in a long time and reflect on my experiences, and reflect on whether or not I was even happy doing the thing that I dedicated my whole life to, right? And so I don't think most people, I didn't open my mouth to sing for like 6 months. I just couldn't. Just because of everything going on in the world, what I had experienced, and just like losing all those opportunities, right? I had to grieve that. And as I was like reflecting, I was like, yeah, I remember my recital when I did the Spanish visit. That was so much fun. Oh my gosh, I didn't find anything in the canon of Afro-Latin people. I was like, that's so weird, because I know the history, like our history of colonialism, there's just no way that there would be more like folks of African descent doing music. So that was like my little hypothesis, right? Sitting at home. So I just started Googling. I mean, it took me like 5 minutes. And I just found immediately the first composer from the New World, like opera composer, that Verdi and Puccini thought he was so amazing. And he, debuted his opera about indigenous people in Brazil, was debuted at La Scala in Milan. And he was an Afro-Brazilian composer. And nobody had mentioned this person to me in 10 years of going to school for opera and classical music. Not once. I was angry. And then I with my own educating myself, like, this is by design. These folks are left out of the narrative to make us feel like we don't belong in that space. But we do. And we have contributed a lot, much more than we're told that we did. So that gave me, I was like, oh, okay, all right. So this person's there. And then I was like, oh, I need some, I had all the time in the world. I was like, how can I get something started? And I was like, oh, I saw that there's a grant here in Pittsburgh called Advancing Black Arts in Pittsburgh. And it's this thing by the Heinz Endowment Pittsburgh Foundation. It's like a special program they do to support Black arts in Pittsburgh. And what I love is that they support Black diasporic arts. So they include anybody that is of African descent. And so I applied. That was my first grant I ever wrote. I'd never written a grant in my life, and I got it. And I was like, what? Oh my God. So then I started with that. And then I just got another grant from them to do programming here in Pittsburgh. But that's how I got started. It was just simply I want to sing stuff about me. I want to commission new things. I want to find the historical things. And I want to sing about me because I am tired. And now it's like a whole thing.
Yeah. So what stage is the project at now? What is the project?
The project is at the stage of where we're currently working on creating an anthology, a collection of works for people to be able to buy and program and have it in their school libraries, have it for themselves. And I think at that point, we can start getting it out there. There are a couple of commissions that are in the works right now. One of the commissions in the workshop stage is something called Requiem for Black Grief. That's with a friend and colleague of mine. She's a performance artist that focuses on grief. And we're utilizing the Black female subject as a way to use grief as a way to memorialize, but also to take care of ourselves. And how does that look like when we do it as a collective, right? And so in that particular project, the audience is kind of an active participant with us. And so that's really cool. I'm working on an opera, commissioning an opera beautiful playwright, Julissa Contreras, beautiful play called La Greña, about a Dominican hair salon.
That's a great name for it, too.
And so there's James Dargan is writing a song cycle for me to sing. And in terms of like current grant that I've gotten, there's programming that's going to be in here in Pittsburgh. There's a couple of recitals happening, like one about one that's about Black diasporic music. So it's going to include a bunch of different local singers singing music from the African diaspora. That was called Negritud. And there's also there's going to be the workshop for the Requiem, and there's also going to be another commemoration of. There's going to be an event. It's going to be a commemoration of Victoria Santa Cruz. She is the Afro-Peruvian folklore. She was part of Carnegie Mellon here for years. That's where she taught.
I know her poem, Me Dijeron Negra. Do you know that poem? Yeah.
So we're going to do something to commemorate her. And there's a couple of other projects. There's a film project I'm working on. That's my most personal project about myself. And really the anthology is the one where we're really trying to get that together and do some collections of the commissions with this Rising Tide Publishing. And so when that's out, I think that's really going to put things on the map. But I should say, I know I say a lot, I should say, when I was in the University of North Texas with Sphinx Lead, one of the professors there let me know that he knew who I was because he'd been reading dissertations where people are referencing my project. So it's part of the academic discourse as well. And I did not realize that something that I needed for myself was going to do so much for the community. And I think that is really fulfilling in a way that I didn't expect.
Yeah, that is beautiful. And also I imagine that that pushing out this anthology and pushing out these resources to music departments across the country is going to have enormous impact. Because you're right. And part of it, it's like it's done intentionally, right? The leaving out of all these narratives and all this genius and all this compositions, and partly also it's ignorant and a little arrogant, right? Well, there can't possibly be any music coming from these places, right? So now see, there's all this material, right? It's going to have a huge impact. Now it's an incredible project.
It's one of those things where, like, even at school, when I did a Spanish recital, like they call it a specialty recital, but a lot of the times music that is not from the European canon is regarded as not as difficult or not as technically difficult, or technically like you need a lot of technique to do it. And I'm just like, no, it's quite the opposite. Because nobody does it. I don't have a reference point for a recording. I don't have this. I don't have that. And those people were studying and doing the work with all of the European folks, right? To like learn how to write. And then we're infusing it with their own culture. So that takes creative genius. And so that attitude, I think, within universities, conservatories, and within like institutions that are doing programming really needs to change.
Today, looking back at the beginnings of that project right there in the pandemic, is there anything you wish you had known as you were getting started with that project that you know now that you would have done differently or that you've learned?
I wish I would have known how much time it takes to commission something. I was like, oh yeah, a year. No. Now I have an appreciation for how long it takes to create something, the cost of it, how much it is. I've learned a lot about, if I'm going to say that if I'm going to purport that I'm a champion for equity, I'm going to say it, but I'm also going to do it. So I'm not going to hire somebody and not pay them what they're worth. So I'm always fighting for that. This is an expensive art form in a lot of ways. But I do think that it has the potential to thrive if we continue to tell our stories and we have the agency to tell our stories. It's a very powerful art form. It moves with the times and moves with where people are at. And so yeah, because I also I underestimated people's attitudes to what opera is. Right, I love it, but people are like, I didn't know people were writing new operas. I thought it was like all dead white people. Like, and so kind of changing, doing some education there, and telling people, hey, I know that you think that this is not for you, but it is. Here's why. And it is historically, and here's why. So doing some of that, I wasn't anticipating as much as I am, as much as I'm doing.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing about the projects and like some specific stories. You're such a multidisciplinary art professional and performing artist and a researcher and an educator. So you're also doing a lot of work regarding social justice and are dedicated to make a difference in the society through arts and music. So I'd really love to learn more about that, how the intersections of art, social justice, and advocacy work for you. How have you this perfectly mixed all of the aspects?
Yeah, I during the time that we were in quarantine, and given the political and social climate of what the things that were happening at that time with the Black Lives Matter movement and how global it was, and the experiences that I had with, racism living abroad in the US too, it really, I did a lot. I took that time to really like educate myself on the histories and the systems that I live in, and really better understand why I experience society and life the way that I do, and why do people of the global majority, or I could say the minoritized people of the world, because we are not minorities, we're minoritized. Why these things happen. And at that moment, I said, yes, I love singing, but what do I want to do with my life? Like, what do I really, like, what is my mission in life, period? And I came up with, I want to use the talents that I have and whatever else I can acquire to make things better for my community. And that could be, so many different intersecting communities. So that's just basically like how I choose to live my life. And so I decided, I want to know if singing is going to come back. Let me get a degree in social work. So I enrolled for social work first. And I got a degree in social work. And to me, it made a lot of sense based on the work that I do in opera. That because I kind of view anytime I'm in a space that was not made for me, that's an act of resistance. That's an act of advocacy. So just being me being in the opera space is a rebellious act, right? Is radical. Just me existing or daring to exist loudly is radical. So I chose to get a social work degree to like just hone my skills in advocacy and that kind of work, so that I can bring it to the art space and be really intentional about it. And so I see my project inherently as advocacy work, as activism, right? You would be surprised at how many of my Latina colleagues do not like my project, actually, because like, why do I have to make it Afro, right? Like, why? And I'm like, why not? Why can I not highlight the thing that everybody sees that dictates how they treat me? Why can't I celebrate that out loud? Why does it make you uncomfortable?
I'm not surprised at all, frankly.
And I'm like, why? Yeah, it's like, why are you so uncomfortable not being centered for like 1 second. It's that, right? And it's like people have to confront them with themselves with things they probably don't even have to think about, but I have to think about all the time, right? So as I was doing the work, I realized I'm doing social justice work within the arts anyway, by being myself and insisting on being myself. So, more, you'd be, and I thought the Zuly that started opera would have never done this because it's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose all my opportunities, right? Because that's how I was conditioned to think. And now I'm like, the more I lean into who I am authentically, the more opportunities I have, the more success I have, because I'm being authentic, right? Like I do this from a real place of wanting to make sure that our stories aren't lost or forgotten now more than ever.
What you said about now leaning into who you are and yourself. And yeah, it's sometimes like in order to conform to sort of like the Caucasian mandates, it's leaning away, right? And leaning away from yourself and then trying to fit into a box that you're never allowed to fit into anyway. So no matter how many contortions you make, you still aren't allowed to access it. And it sort of forces you to get further and further away from yourself. So that discovery that you made of just, I might as well lean in. I might as well go in there. I'm interested in your journey as a leader, right? Because it seems like you were in a position of being more of a supplicant, right? Or waiting or trying to fit in. And then you decided, you know what? No, I'm going to take this on. So I'm interested in that journey, is how you became a leader, how you learned to become an arts manager, and what was it in your character and the skill set that you have that allows you to become that?
I've always been headstrong.
That helps.
That, as my mom said, cuando Zuly quiere algo, Zuly lo hace. That's it. She said her mind to something, she does it. So true. Kind of a side note, y'all could keep it in the podcast if you want. One of the things that I did that lets you know how headstrong I am, I had like a internet pen pal for like 4 years from France. And when I went to grad school, I bought a plane ticket to France and told my parents after, and I stayed with him for 2 weeks, and I had never met him before.
So you're either crazy reckless or very brave, or not.
It's a little bit of both. I think that sometimes in leadership and when you're like envisioning like new possibilities, like thriving possibilities, you kind of have to be a little crazy. Like you have to be a little bit radical and out there. And that was one of those. That's one of the moments I look back at and I was like, man, Zuly in her purest form is either chaos or awesome. Like, right? It's a little bit of chaos in there. And I definitely think, being that I was raised by a matriarch, so I had a really beautiful example of a woman that was in charge, that was running a whole house, running a whole business. So it was a workaholic. So, my mom, she did not finish high school, had her own business in the US, a successful business with my father. And it sustained us and got me private school. And, so I had a really good example there of like what to do and how to do it. So when I started leaning back into myself, I kind of found my voice again and found that confidence to say the things that I saw that were injustices, and nobody really was having these conversations. And so I started with kind of just very simply like online activism when people were in quarantine. I mean, it's all archived now, but I have posts on Instagram talking about what is Afro-Latinidad, what is Latinx, why are people getting pissed about the X and Latinx?
I have feelings about the X, but not.
People could have so many feelings about the X. That's okay. People don't have to like it. I think where I get upset about it is when people are like, well, white people are imposing this on us. And I was like, actually, no. The X came from queer people of color in Latin America that were using it as arroba, and they had to get rid of that because it became an app to like tag people. It comes from us, and you can use it if you want or not. You know, um, I'm always fighting that. I'm gonna fight Pew Research one day about this. But
well, you know what gets to me about the X? The thing about the X is I'm totally down with the with making gender inclusive and all that. I wish that it was a letter that was the letter that we use more at the end of a word. So for me, the X is at the beginning of words for indigenous languages. So could it be an E? Could it be an I? That could it be a U? I'd be fine with that. And the other thing is that many of us who are here in the States are immigrants from Latin America. So Latinx feels very much like an ex-Latino, and I will never be an ex-Latino. That's my number one identity, right? So that's the issue I have with it. It's not the language imposition or the gringo imposition that some people think it is, right? It's not that. But it's that to me, it's sort of like it's a letter that really belongs to indigenous peoples at the beginning of a lot of their words. And also it's ex-Latinx. But I use it, because it is the term, right? But I'm always like, oh.
But people use Latina all the time.
Yeah, that's what we use in the podcast. We talk about Latina, women identifying, right? Latinas, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I use them interchangeably. I called my Afro-Latinx song and opera project because at the time when I started my project, I literally was only going to do commissions of like the Afro-Latin community in the United States, right? I conceptualized it in a way that at first I was like, it's going to be this, but it's just grown. And that's why I did the X, but also I do like whatever makes people happy. I think it's cool that we're taking language that was imposed on us and making it our own. I think that's the beauty of it in there. As my friend, it's like we're confronting the coloniality of a language.
Yeah. It's like, what do you mean we can't touch Spanish? Which is why I'm totally fine with changing it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? It's going to probably turn into something else in like years. And I'm curious to see what happens.
I'm excited about these articles that have been coming out about the new language that's coming out in Miami and in Texas, the new Spanglish, the variations of Spanglish that are coming out.
I speak that Spanglish from Miami. I grew up in Miami. So I go home and I'm talking like that,
Yeah.
We've been talking like this for 20, 30, 40 years. Like, and I need to see supposedly in the dictionary somewhere.
It's going to happen. It'll happen. One more thing, and then I know she wants to ask you something else, but what has surprised you? You said one thing that surprised you about this project was that it got a lot bigger, a lot quicker than you thought it would. What about your role as a leader, right? Your role as an advocate. What has surprised you?
I didn't set out necessarily to be a leader. I just saw a gap that was not being addressed. And so I was like, if nobody else is going to do it, I'm going to have to do it. Right. And that's how usually it starts. Right. And then once I guess, like I said, I'm a very nerdy person. So when I started like doing things, I'm like, I need to gain more skills. So I then applied for the Advocacy Institute at the National Association of Latino Arts and Cultures. And I did that one virtually. And I did the Leadership Institute with them. Then I applied for the first time ever to Sphinx Lead and got accepted into cohort 5. And I was like, wow. So all these people see something in me that to me is just like, this is just who I am. And I really, from other like objective points of view, started taking the feedback of like, oh, I can really utilize myself as a tool to get work done. And that's how I see leadership, right? It's not because I'm imposing things on anybody. I see leadership as being almost being like a steward, community work, collective work. I come from a community-centric point of view. I come from a liberation, Black point of view. So the work, that's why I always say the work is not just about me. I'm just cool. So I wasn't expecting to be looked at in this way. And I had discomfort with it at first. I still did like, I'm very visible. Even though I sing opera, it's weird. I know.
I was going to say, you know what your profession was originally, right? You are aware.
Well, yeah, but I'm pretending to be somebody else. It's not me. And then now at this point, it's me. I'm like, I had to really get comfortable with Zuly. And what did that mean? Leaning in further. And then, of course, I'm a huge advocate for mental health, right? Everybody should go see a therapist. Everybody should have somebody they could talk to. Everybody talk through things that is a professional. And if somebody's listening, they're like, I want to have a therapist, but I don't have access to one. Find me on some social media because I will find you a place that has sliding scale. I will find you something. As it's something else I help people with. Like I got you. But I'm an ideas girl, so I have these big ideas, and I think that also contributes to that's one of the leadership qualities. I think I'm a creative that thinks creatively, and in kind of like the more kind of buttoned up corporate spaces, people are a little scared of me because I'm like, I come up with these creative solutions and they're like, oh, or they'll think it's work. I'm like, trust me, it works. I swear. And so what surprises me is that leadership. I knew I was going to be doing something where I was going to be in charge at some point. But I don't know what, but I really needed, I don't think I would have been, I don't think I would be where I am today if I didn't have that moment where I decided, hey, I'm going to lean into exactly who I am. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I've gotten out of like all the support, all the leadership support is continue to lean into who you are. I've gotten a lot of support. Nobody can do anything in a silo. Like one of the strengths of leadership is to recognize, I think, our interconnectedness actually, and see where our strengths are and grow from there. I'm a leader of something. I'm not anybody without the people that are doing operations, development, this. What's the point? Who am I then if I don't have any of that? You know, I really appreciate the interconnectedness, the interdependence, and how important community is. What surprises me is that the more I do this, the more I see the possibilities of what could be, and that's really exciting.
Yeah, that's such a smooth transition to the question I wanted to ask. Yeah, you talked about the sense of community and how interdependent we are. And I wanted to ask you about your mentors who you met throughout your professional development. And also, as you're a teaching artist as well, what kind of mentor are you aspiring to be for your mentees?
Yeah. Oh, wow. Your questions. Wow. Oh, so thoughtful. So my mentors, I always say, I would not be anything if it weren't for Black women in Pittsburgh. I came here in the middle of a pandemic and virtually they scooped me up and they said, you got this, you got this, you got this. One of the first things I got here in Pittsburgh was a Black teaching artist in residence fellowship with an organization called Unisound. And my mentors there is Dr. Kendra Ross. She's currently the head of social impact here at Duolingo. And she's also a beautiful singer herself. My other mentor here is a woman named Lee Solomon Pugliano. She's a beautiful woman, a Guyanese, steel pan family. Her father makes steel pans. It's amazing. And she has the Equity Impact Center. And through that, she has something called the Scale Fellowship for Black Women in Music. So that was one of the first fellowships I got where I got to strategize and talk and ideate with someone that said, hey, what do you want to do? Let's help you do it. And I got to do a showcase where I got to envision like what I wanted the stage to be like and what the environment to be like for an Afro-Latin recital. So that was the first time I got to do that. Flex that creativity like embody the thing that I've been doing. And it was really beautiful. It was a dream, and it still is. Ugh. And then my other mentor that I want to give props to is I cold emailed her, actually. She was a professor at the University of Pittsburgh here, and she focused on Afro-Latinidad. And I emailed her, Dr. Michelle Reed Vasquez, and she was like, why do I not know about you? And immediately was like, friend. We worked together at the Center for Ethnic Studies Research. She was the founding director. She's currently now at Bowdoin College in Portland, Maine. And actually, I talked to her today. And she is a phenomenal woman, her background is in piano performance. She completely understood me, you know, as a person with a scholarly work, historical work, but also has a musical background and focus on Afro-Latinidades. And I still collaborate with her, and we're friends, and she's going to be my lifelong mentor. As for me as a teaching artist and being mentor to people, something I do in my current position as co-director for the Center for Ethnic Studies Research is that for our students and our staff, both co-directors, both of us, we do professional development. So one of our staff members gets to do professional development with me all the time. And how I approach it is I'm actually there to support and sharing my experiences, but I also learn so much from my mentees about where people are right now, what's needed, and how I can grow as a mentor. And so I approach mentorship very generous with my mentorship, I would say, and in terms of time and thought, thinking out things, and I don't believe in gatekeeping. It's more, as they say, if I'm going to meet, I'm going to eat, we're all going to eat, right? I don't believe in gatekeeping at all. And so and I'm very honest with people. This is the experience I had in Abra. These are the things I liked and don't like. Does that mean you're going to have the same experience? Maybe not. But I want to let you know that that does happen. But I'm not going to dissuade you from things. So, yeah, I come from a place of just being honest, authentic, and generous with my time. And I learn as I'm doing, I'm learning all the time.
You are very generous because you've been very generous with us and the things that you've shared. And I want to know, because all of these things take an enormous amount of energy, right? Take an enormous amount of work and energy. Where do you find your joy and your energy? Where do you feed on to keep going?
So I love to sleep. I love rest. Sometimes it's hard for me to get my mind to stop. So I've been really mindful about doing things that are very grounding to keep me from spinning out. So I do, and I'm looking at them, have a lot of plants that I take care of. Started that in the pandemic, as a lot of people did. I learned with plants that if you give them too much, they don't do well. If you give them too little, they don't do well. So you have to be present with them where they're at and then give them what they need. So that's been really helpful. I have dogs. They're really cute. I have boundaries around when I'm working, when I'm not, which I try to adhere to. I try to give my, and I try, and I spend time with my partner, no electronics, just hanging out, doing things. I like something called, or people call it forest bathing. I like being out and invigorating my senses without electronics. That to me is very restorative. And more often than not, it gets my creativity going. But those things that bring me joy are doing artistic things that don't have to do anything with the kind of art that I make. So I'm a big fan of paint by numbers. And I'm a big fan of something called diamond painting. I'll be watching TV. I'm like, oh no, my little clients having the greatest time of my life.
With the little tweezers.
Right. Just
so satisfying.
super satisfying. I find it so fun. Also, like spending time with friends. So I have my friends here or people I spend time with. I find spending time with my friends really also invigorating, restorative. So just connection, I think. Also time to myself sometimes, but mostly connection. I also find joy. The thing is, I'm very lucky that all the work that I do for work is actually things that make me happy. You know, like, I mean, I get to do research about Afro-Latin composers. Like, it's literally a dream. And so, and people hire me to sing things that I want to sing. It's literally a dream. So sometimes work is just so fun. I'm so grateful that, I had this wacky idea of like, hey, let me do this thing and do this thing and make it into a career. And people are like, okay, we see it. And now they're like, yeah, we see it. I'm like, oh, thank goodness. Well,
so Zuly, you have this wealth of experience, but if you could give you an advice when you were just entering the field, what would that be that you didn't know, but you wish you knew?
Don't believe them when they tell you you're not good enough.
Where were you when I was 18, 19, and 20, and 30, and 35, and 40? Where were you?
If I think about this sometimes, right? If I were the person that I am now, then, woof, and then I would have lit the place ablaze. Like, I would have been like, nope, 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 right? Not that voice. So I would tell you, don't believe them. Just don't. It's a lie. They don't get you. It's okay. So that's what I would have told myself. She would have been much happier.
So as you know, Zuly, we ask in every one of these conversations, we ask each gestora to leave a question for someone else. And Carmen Marquez, who I believe you know, left a question for you. Her question was, without knowing it was for you, I should clarify that. Carmen left this question. Do you have goals or do you have intentions?
Okay. I would say both and, right? My intentions turn into goals, right? My goals are led through my intentions. So they're like a little loop. One all the time. My intention. I sometimes feel like a goal can feel finite, but nah, they can always change, right? They can always grow. So they're kind of in the loop, both.
You're going to have to take that one up with Carmen then.
Yeah, me and Carmen are going to have to chat about that.
There's no or in this sentence, in this question. Right? That's an and intention. So Zuly, finally, is there a question that you thought of to leave for another gestora?
Absolutely. So for the next gestora, if you were to choose another medium for storytelling, which would it be and why?
That's a great question. It's a challenge, really. Zuly Inirio, it's been an absolute pleasure to spend this time with you. Thank you so very much for sharing all of this with us.
Thank you. That was such a great conversation.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
This was Gestoras. This episode of Gestoras was recorded in Washington, D.C. and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It was hosted by Jimena Varela and Anush Titanian and produced by Anush Titanian. The music was Hace que Exista, Make It Exist by Eli Almic, and the graphic design was by Bia Silva.
Gestoras is mixed and supported in part by the Arts Management Program at American University, Washington, D.C. For 50 years, the Arts Management program at American University has been training leaders in the arts to change the world for the better. Find out more at artsmanagement.american.edu. Follow us on YouTube at Hestoras and on Facebook and Instagram at Hestoras Podcast. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to like and subscribe.